Simple is simplified processes, amplified results. Simple is.
My name is Yasser. I am the founder and CEO at SimpleEd. So our organization does recruitment events globally in many different countries, and we've been doing so for 8 years. And during these 8 years, we've worked with many great universities. We've watched how they recruit. We've seen best practices being implemented and sometimes not so best practices. So together, hopefully, we can share something insightful that can help you build a much stronger communication campaign when you are recruiting out in the field. Over to you, Megan.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining today. My name's Megan, and I'm really happy today to be here with Yasser. I work for a company called UniQuest. We've been in business for the last 11 years. I've been with the company for 5 years, though, but we are dedicated to helping institutions improve their conversion services. So we work from really the first point of inquiry. So once that lead is generated, through to the point of enrollment, making sure that our institutional partners, their students are really having the best experience possible and are being nurtured kind of consistently and proactively up until the point of enrollment. And so Yasser and I are providing kind of complementary perspectives today on this webinar, thinking about really from the point that that interest is generated to the point of enrollment holistically.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Megan. The other thing is I hope everyone can see our screen because we will be using a presentation deck. So hopefully you can see my screen. If you cannot, please type in the chat box and Arlene will try to help you out with that. So with that being said, let's dive in. The first item is going over the agenda. So we have tried our best to create a session that really empowers you in actually taking back home some of the action items that you can immediately implement in your strategies and in your communication plan. So we will go over the student journey, as Megan mentioned, from the first contact all the way till enrollment. And then we'll cover what are some re-engagement strategies, including looking at some best practices. So that is the agenda for this webinar. With that being said, let's dive in. So we want to just spend a couple of minutes just introducing how this idea came about and what are some of the motivations behind putting this webinar together. So as I mentioned, while recruiting, one of the things that we really see that we are collecting a lot of good quality leads, and but sometimes, unfortunately, due to lack of resources or maybe having a one-person office, it becomes very challenging to call every student, email every student, answer every inquiry. So what are some of the ways to address this issue? Because it really doesn't make sense investing in lead generation platforms, traveling to collect those leads when we do not have the bandwidth or the resources to really support all of these inquiries. Megan, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's much more kind of strategic to think comprehensively about the entire thing. If you are going to invest up front, you want to make sure that those students have the best chance possible of going on to enroll at your institution.
Absolutely. So the first thing I think that me and Megan both agreed on, that the starting point is to understand the student's journey and looking at the recruitment funnel. And we also want to acknowledge that funnels can look different for different institutions and different strategies. But generally speaking, just generalizing the whole recruitment process, this is roughly a commonly accepted funnel where you start with creating an awareness so students and all the other stakeholders know that your institution exists, right? That's the first step. The second step is generating some sort of interest, so they're intrigued to find out more. And third is where they consider, like if they're shortlisting 10 institutions, because there's not a single student that just applies to one institution, right? They're all applying to at least 5 to 10, if not more. So you are one of those choices. How do we get to that point? And after you become one of those choices, Then we get into application, enrollment, visas, and all of that. And I think one of the things that Megan did not mention is that she's also worked for multiple universities. So she has seen both the sides, and currently she's working with multiple universities at the same time and seeing how each one of them are doing the not lead generation, sorry, lead nurturing. So with that being said, Megan, do you want to comment anything on the funnels and how people see it differently at different institutions?
Yeah, absolutely. Yasser and I were talking about how it's interesting since he works, primarily at the top of the funnel. It makes sense that kind of awareness and interest and consideration would be really like the focal points of his activity. Whereas because we focus more on kind of lead generation onwards or application onwards, we're focusing kind of much more what I like to call like the micro steps of the funnel. So once an application is started, then thinking about, application complete to then the point of being admitted, being an I-20 holder, an I-901, payer, to then a deposit student, a visa holder, kind of thinking about all those steps along the way up to the point of enrollment. But it's really important to kind of, whatever the steps are in your process, whatever type of institution you are, you really need to understand those stages so that you can properly nurture the students and understand what your defined steps are really along the way. If you're only thinking about kind of enrollment, you're missing a lot of really important milestones along the way that you should be coaching students through and kind of supporting them through along the way. So it's not just thinking about the end result, but kind of all of the steps that it takes to get there in the process and making sure those students feel supported and in the loop kind of along the way. It's difficult as an international student to go through all of those hurdles to get to the US, but it's kind of our job, as institutions to help them get there and to do our jobs, proactively supporting them.
Correct. So the conclusion of this slide is that when as an institution you're thinking about recruitment, we want to encourage you to think about all of these processes, whether it's terms of resource allotment, like don't just come to my organization and spend all of your money on recruitment events, because we're going to get you really good quality leads, but you have to conserve some of those resources to invest in nurturing those leads and converting those leads, right? So we want to encourage all the institutions to look at the whole funnel and deploy their resources, time, bandwidth, capacity in all of these different stages of the student life cycle, so to speak. So with that being said, the next thing we want to bring your attention to is we were looking at different data out there, and one of the data that stuck out, which I think a lot of you would agree with, that when agents were surveyed around the world, 57% of them said that the most help that they can get from institution is getting quick responses, right? And when Megan and I were creating this presentation, one of the things that kept coming back is how quickly can we respond? So we just wanted to make sure that we address that at the beginning of the presentation itself, that when we talk about capacity building or allocating resources, it is important to remember that whether you're getting a website chat inquiry or an email inquiry or a phone call, what is the process in place to quickly respond to that? And Megan is an expert in that. I think she'll expand on that a little bit later in the presentation as well. So before we begin and get into the strategy building, we just wanted to quickly talk about what are the common pitfalls that we see, because we go on the road, we invest a lot on marketing, and we generate all of this excitement and interest, but sometimes like student emails, and then you never ever hear back from that student. So how does that interest fizzle out, and what are some of the things that we've seen institutions maybe that they can improve upon so that doesn't happen? So the first thing is, like we said, that response time is exceptionally important. And from my perspective, in my job, I see something, on an ongoing basis. To give you a practical example, if you're coming and traveling to India with me and it's a 10-day tour, so on day one, you would meet a student in New Delhi who's super excited. He's looking forward to hear from you that evening. But on the 10th day of the tour, you're going to fly back to United States, come back to your office, you're going to have 500 emails to answer. So when is that student going to hear back from you, right? So it makes complete sense that before you come on that trip, there is a plan in place that every day the leads are being submitted and the student immediately hears back. Because if they wait to hear back from you, um, the momentum would have been lost. So that's one of the things. The other thing that we want to talk about is lack of communication channels. Sometimes we see that institutions only give students one communication channel, which is email. We don't see WhatsApp being deployed as much, or social media is hit or miss most of the time. If a student is sending you a Facebook message, who is that message going to? How quickly is that message being responded to? So we just want to encourage everyone to think about what are some communication channels that you can deploy in your marketing and communication apart from emailing, because as we know, this generation is moving away from emails. And let's keep in mind that when we build our communication plans and strategies, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of 16 and 17 years old, because that's who our target audiences are. With that being said, Megan, do you want to talk about the last point on the slide?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important that, if a student sends you a communication, you want to answer, but it's not just answering that one time. If a student's telling you that they're having trouble submitting an application or uploading their application materials, you want to answer, but it's not just answering, it's checking back in with them a week later saying, hey, did you have success getting those uploaded, or is there anything else that I can help you with? We call that reciprocal communications. And typically, if you're able to engage a student in reciprocal communications, it more than doubles their likelihood to go on and convert to an enrollment. So it's really important that you want to get them in a conversation and then keep that conversation going over time. And just wanted to go back to the point about, the first bullet point of slow responses. We find that 83% of students expect a same-day response. And that's not just that they want that, it's that their expectation is to receive a same-day response. And so if your institution's not giving them that response, they'll go on to the next one that is. And so it's really critical in such a competitive marketplace right now, where there's so many institutions, thousands literally in the US competing for the same students, that you have the right kind of student-focused or customer service mindset to be really responsive to those students, not just the first time, but then in an ongoing kind of proactive capacity over time.
Absolutely. So moving on to the next slide, where we're going to talk about that every recruitment cycle or student's journey starts with lead generation. Somehow that lead comes to you, right? And in our industry, education fairs, education tours, events, get buying leads. Sometimes universities buy leads from SAT, TOEFL. So there's many different channels that you can get those leads from. But I want to specifically talk about fairs, events, tours, because those are very commonly used strategies. Long before social media existed, these channels have existed. So when we do go to such events, from an institution's perspective, you are looking to have that face-to-face interaction with your prospective students, and that helps you understand if this is a qualified lead, what is their English proficiency, what is their paying capacity, what programs are they looking for, do they have an uncle in the same state as you? So there are many intel that you gather to understand if this student might be a qualified lead for your institution. And during these tours, you are only working on the top end of the funnel. Nothing can happen about the bottom end. That can only happen later down in the journey. So we want to make sure that as you're doing this, you're already prepared for the next step. But let's turn the tables a little bit and look at a fair or an event from a student's perspective, right? So when you are going to a fair as an institution, you are making a commitment to the student that I am invested in talking to you. That's the message that you are sending, right? And they're excited to talk to you. There's like almost never have I seen students not be excited talking to universities because they're so excited about the future and possibilities. And when they make a personal connection with you, they see how kind you are, how awesome you are, they're even more excited, right? Now when they go back home, talk to their parents, and their parents are like, yeah, I support your ambition, go ahead, you have my blessing, and they email you and don't hear back for 6 days. That is not just like from a strategic point of view, but also emotional point of view. It's kind of heartbreaking for them, and they might think that, hey, Megan doesn't like me anymore, I don't know what happened. So I think when you are going and investing in events, you have even greater responsibility, in my opinion, to fulfill the expectations that you have built for the student. So with that responsibility, we want to make sure that once you are making that investment, it's even more important for you to take that next step of how am I gonna nurture this lead and help the student who I've built this initial connection with. The other thing is, from students' perspective, they're gonna expect even a faster response from you, even a more personalized response for you, because the other 7 universities that they're talking to, they have never met them, but you are the one that they have met. So they're like, okay, this is the one who's gonna treat me better, who's gonna be kinder to me. So that we cannot run away from that expectation, which is the reality. And as Megan said, in United States itself, there's 3,000 plus universities and colleges. But when you are recruiting internationally, you are competing with all the other countries, including their home country. So I think that needs to be kept in mind as we're creating these strategies. So we are almost 15 minutes in, so about 50% of the presentation. So now let's get to the meat and the most important aspect, which is the strategy building aspect. But before we get into that, we're going to talk about communication channel content and a lot of important stuff. We just wanted to quickly show you what the data says about what are the most important recruitment channels as reported by agents, and this survey was done by ISIF. So you can see word of mouth and non-digital is still number 1, right? So we want to make sure that when we are meeting students in person, whether they become our enrolled students or not, they're still having a positive experience interacting with us or our team. If they don't, the word of mouth definitely can work against you a little bit. But look at this data and see how you can use some of these channels in your communication plan as you create them. So now we have created the whole strategy into 3 different steps. And this is step number 1 that talks about creation of a communication and plan. So one of the first things that I want to talk to universities about is when you are about to embark on a journey, whether to a fair or a tour or a conference, it's very important to have a very clear CTA or call to action, right? If I was to tell you, magically everyone will do whatever you ask them to do, everyone that you meet, what would you ask them to do, right? So the next step cannot be awareness to enrollment, right? So there are many steps that need to be followed. So what is that next step? Talk to your team and see what that step can be. Do you want them to schedule a meeting with your advisors? Do you want them to maybe enroll in a free class that you're offering? What is that next step? I don't know. Every institution will have a very different idea. But once you identify that call to action, it must be resonated in all the different channels, right? Your email should say the same thing. Verbally, you should say the same thing. Your presentation should say the same thing, so on and so forth. So I believe that is the number 1 decision that you need to take when you're creating that strategy. And once all of your call to actions are clear, it doesn't have to be 1. It can be more than 1 for sure. But once your communication is clear, what is the desired action that you're seeking, then you can go ahead and choose the communication channels, right? So there's various channels that are listed on the screen, but this is where we have to be creative and a little bit more innovative. We understand that email is a very important channel of communication, and this will definitely always be around. But let's keep in mind when we're talking about 16 and 17 years old, it's their choices are different. So I'll give you a quick example, right? We have run this experiment many times. If you're going to send a video to a student, your university has invested a lot of money, time, effort into creating a very beautiful video, and you want to share it with all the prospective students. You email it to 1,000 Indian students and you WhatsApp it to 1,000 students. I can almost guarantee your WhatsApp will have double the success rate, right? So if you do not have a WhatsApp account and you want to recruit Indian students, you're already way behind, right? So the content is important, messaging is important, CTA is important, but your communication channels are very important as well. So that's my 2 cents on this. I know Megan has a lot of interesting points to add as well. So over to you, Megan.
Yeah, I'll just touch in on the last one about having a consistent tone of voice. This is where your branding is really important. And I'd encourage you all to reach out to the marketing team at your institution if you haven't already. That's where your brand guidelines can come really handy. Oftentimes your institution might have a preferred kind of tone of voice, whether it's preferred like verbs that you're using or kind of a preferred way to describe the institution and your core values. I've often found when I was working at universities, quite rare often for like an international recruitment and admissions team to be working kind of with central marketing. So that can be a really good relationship to build up. But whether you're meeting a student at a fair or communicating with them 8 months later, that tone of voice and the personality of the institution, you as the representative or the institution at large, it should always feel really consistent. The institution should have kind of the same persona throughout the entire journey. And whether they're talking with you on the phone or reading one of your emails, it should always feel like the same tone of voice. It should feel very consistent to students rather than kind of having very jarring different messages depending on what channel they're talking to or what person they're talking to. And so that's a really important thing as you're kind of nurturing them throughout the process. That consistency is key.
So moving on to the next slide, which is step number 2. Once you have created a call to action or several call to actions and identified what are the communication channels you're going to use, it's time to create some of the collaterals that you're going to be using. And as Megan pointed out, of course, the tone of voice is important. Call to action is important. Consistency is important. Every collateral should be supporting the same goal or the same strategies. It should not come across as the print material is very different than the email that you're sending versus the text email versus the phone call that the student received. They all have to be consistent. And that's where CTA will help guide you, right? Everything will end with the same call to action. And once you identify the tone, you can incorporate that in everything. So one of the first things that I always talk about, a lot of back and forth of emails can be addressed by investing some time in the pre-tour or the pre-fair, meetings and identifying what are the jargons that's used in that specific country, right? For example, in India, you use lakhs. You don't use 100,000, right? That's 1 lakh. So if you say, hey, my tuition is 6 lakh, the student immediately understands that. Then we don't use GPAs unless you're in an IB school. You're mostly going to use percentage. So you can do a quick conversion, back in the office, and you can say, hey, if you have more than 75%, you will qualify for a scholarship. Student immediately understands that. So just changing a little bit of a jargon on your marketing materials can go really long way. And then I always like to look at how local universities are recruiting. If I'm going to Brazil, I'm going to look at how Brazilian. I'll Google a lot of marketing materials that they are putting out. And it's very interesting to see, how their materials are so different from American institutions that are trying to recruit. Once again, I'll give you a quick example from India because I came to US as an international student myself, originally from India. And I see a lot of Indian universities talk about air-conditioned classrooms, Wi-Fi on campus. Have you even thought about mentioning that to the students, especially if you are from a rural campus, right? If you are from a community college or if your tuition is much more affordable. So think from the perspective of a father who's in a tier 2 city in India. Can they, like, you're taking that high speed internet for granted. For them, rural is equal to power cut, access, not access to resources, maybe air conditioning is a luxury. So those are things that are important to include. But of course, for every market, it's going to be different. So that is one of the things that I really wanted to share with you that can help you create your materials. The next thing is talking like creating event specific landing pages. I'll talk about landing pages, and Megan will talk about emails. So by landing pages, I don't mean anything super fancy. If your IT team can, or marketing team can help you create one page which can house all the information relevant for that specific market, so it will not only help the student to see everything that is relevant to them in their own language. When I say language, I'm still talking about English. I am talking about jargon. But once that landing page is created, instead of sharing simpleed.edu, you will go ahead and share simpleed.edu/India, right? In all your marketing materials, in your communication, in your presentation. So what it's going to do for you is it's going to enable you to see the traffic on that specific web page. If the traffic is increasing, you can, be confident that you did a good job and people are coming to your landing page. Then you can have a event specific inquiry form on that page. You can use region specific language jargon on that page. If there's a special scholarship that you created for Indian students and you don't want all the other countries to find out about that, you can host that there. So creating that landing page will give you a lot of tools that will help you analyze the results of your efforts as well. Over to you, Megan.
Yeah, and with having kind of event-specific emails, that is really helpful. You can often set up where, or we do this with a lot of our partners, where as soon as the lead is generated and it hits the platform, you can have a series of emails automatically kick off that, thank the student for, the time that they spent at the booth, at the fair, saying it was great to meet you. We're so happy you had a chance to connect with Joe. Here's some more information to help you get started. And then you can segment that off where if they click on the link to learn more about housing on your campus, then they get another series of emails that, focus more specifically about student life on campus or meal plan options or whatever. Or if they click to learn more about your College of Engineering, then they get a series of emails that kind of lead them that direction. So that way they get kind of really targeted emails that lead them on the specific paths that they're interested in. And of course, just like with the landing pages, you can track all of those metrics to see what it is that they're interested in, and then generating kind of that specific content that they're interested in to kind of keep feeding them what it is that they're interested in. Again, with specific calls to action of leading them towards the path of having the right fit students, starting applications, and then hopefully moving towards enrolling along the way.
Great. So this is, again, talking about creating re-engagement strategies. One quick tip that we wanted to give, because we are talking about response time quite a bit. And one of the ideas that came up, that while you are creating a strategy, it might also be helpful to create some type of a internal policy, so to speak, where you are tracking or commonly agreeing as a team that how quickly will you respond to emails, right? How are you going to handle that? And at least set up a target for your team that every email will be answered in, let's say, 3 hours, 6 hours, whatever you're comfortable with. So there is a target that your team is going after. That will help you align things a little bit better. And techniques for segmenting leads based on behavior and interest. Megan, do you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, sure. I kind of touched on it a little bit in the last one, but whether it's kind of leads or any really stage in the funnel, it's important to not treat all of your students the exact same. Yasser mentioned Indian students and Brazilian students at one point in time, but their universities would not, in their home countries would not recruit them the same way. And so you certainly shouldn't be communicating with them in the same way. but also certainly you wouldn't try to recruit, a fine arts student the same way you would recruit an engineering student. And so it's really important to kind of think about that. An undergraduate student who is maybe 17 years old probably works with their parents much, much more than someone that might be considering an LLM program that already has a law degree in their home country and is wanting to come to the US to get that Master of Laws degree. And so it's important to think about, who are you talking with? What age are they? What country are they coming from? Kind of what's their professional or academic background? And it's important to then tailor those communications to them so that it feels relevant and authentic to their needs and to their interests. Again, because if I was a fine arts student getting emails about engineering research, I would think this probably isn't the school for me. But maybe you also have a great fine arts program that I just have no idea about. So it's important to take that extra time and energy to really craft the right message for the right student.
Correct. And great example, because the fine art student has questions about their portfolio, they're more creative, whereas maybe the STEM student is more worried about their grades, their OPT, the kind of professors with terminal degree, and what will they get to learn. So even the approach to finding the right fit institution might be very different. And if all of this is sounding overwhelming, think about creating templates for most commonly sought after programs. So we understand if you have 50 programs, you cannot have like 50 customized messages, but the research clearly shows STEM programs is typically number one. Business follows quite second. So at least for the top 3-5 programs, we can have customized campaigns and customized approaches.
Or just start basic, even with like separating out, grad and undergrad, or, breaking it out by academic college or something like that. It doesn't have to be super tailored, but at least splitting out in the most basic ways is still better than lumping everyone together.
Great point. Yes. I mean, we just want to encourage everyone to start. You don't have to just implement everything that you're hearing today. Just pick up wherever feels most comfortable for you, and you can definitely always build upon that first step. So here we obviously understand a lot of institutions, if not all, are using technology and CRM to help them. A lot of them use Slate, Salesforce. So you can also talk to each other and see how best to utilize those CRM tools. But there's a couple of terms that I want to share with everyone. So autoresponders are exceptionally great. So if you have an inquiry form and a student fills it out, let's say, go back to the example of fine arts. If that's what they pick, automatically they get some information about fine arts, So that is a great way to cut down that manual customization. If that is possible in your CRM, that would be great. The other term that is used a lot is drip campaign, right? What drip campaign means that you have already created 5, 6, 7, whatever you're comfortable with, pieces of communication. So if Megan emails me and says, Yasser, I'm really interested in Simple Ed program XYZ, I will answer her question, but I will also add her to one of the drip campaigns. So for example, the first communication she will get is, here's a video on how to fill out our application. And since you inquired about our fine arts program, here's a video about our fine arts faculty. And the third messaging will be something else, and so on and so forth. This is also commonly used, and we encourage you to inquire about it and see if your marketing team can help you create those. And the last and the most common sense one is templates. If the whole team creates templates, whether it's WhatsApp messaging templates or email templates, whatever communication channel you're using, your messaging will be consistent, and with a couple of words, you will be able to write really long responses. So that's also a very handy tool for you to use. But the last thing that I'm going to pass it on over to Megan is one of the things that I see in our industry quite frequently. When we're talking about the top of the funnel, lead generation, there's a lot of universities who use company like Simple Ed. There's a lot of companies that use fair organizers, such as so many different vendors out there. There are many companies that buy lists from SAT, TOEFL. So there's it's very common to get that outside help for lead generation. But I don't see universities trying to seek that outside help for nurturing the leads, which is very, very important. So Megan, what do you have to say about that? And how do you think outside or service providers can help universities with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what we do. So we help nurture students really throughout the entire funnel. I can see one of our partners on this webinar. Hi, Oscar. And so we help students kind of move throughout the funnel. And so it is an option for institutions that have really maybe small teams where they're kind of struggling to give those fast responses to all of their students. Or to be able to have the ability to kind of manage all of the demand that's coming in and move students through and give them that personalized support that they really expect and need throughout the funnel. But yeah, there are companies like us that do exist out there that can help students move more effectively throughout the funnel while also giving them that really personalized and custom support and really kind of improving conversion throughout the entire funnel, not just the enrollment conversion, but applicant to admitted student conversion or lead to applicant conversion. So yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah. And once again, if at this point of time you're thinking, hey, I don't have the budget, maybe I won't get the approval, let's start with the graduate assistant. If you're going on a tour or an event, let's start with the student worker. But you definitely need to get that outside support that can help you get those faster responses. You will really see a good increase in your yield if you're able to do that. I think this is one of the last pieces of strategies that we will see. I have seen this, actually being implemented successfully, and it's very easy to implement. I'm a big fan of creating a specific post-event webinar, fair, any kind of event that student can participate in. So when I'm talking to a student, instead of saying, hey, here's my business card, why don't you email me? I'm saying, hey, you are interested, you're asking some great questions. This student from your own country is doing a webinar about life on my university. Why don't you join it? Ask your parents to attend it as well. If you like it, then after that we can have a conversation and take this further. And a lot of students are much more open to that, because even if they're not like actually listening to the webinar, they'll just log in, they'll be doing their things, and if something piques their interest, they will come and listen to it. So we've seen this strategy being used really, really well. So think about it. If you can host, if you're going on a fair, can you do a post-fair webinar, a virtual Q&A? Some institutions have done, something as simple as, I'll give you a tour of the campus. Grab your iPhone or whatever phone you have and just log on to Zoom and show them around. So there are many different easy to implement strategies instead of just requesting them to email you and waiting for those emails and those emails don't come. And is it possible to attach an incentive to your call to action? If you attend this webinar, you will get a free application waiver, right? Or then we will talk about the scholarship that we have created specifically for international students. If you can attach that, then you can, of course, enhance the attendance at these webinars or any kind of virtual event that you're doing. The other thing is students are much more plugged into social media than we are. So if you have any kind of idea, small, big, if you have students that are influencers on your campus, I personally know universities who have gotten like tons of students because one student on their campus was an influencer, made a YouTube video. So look in your student body and see how you can, make use of that social media. There are tons of strategies out there. I think a separate session could be done on social media itself. So I really don't want to get too much into that, but definitely think about some sort of post-event, post-fair, post-tour event that you can organize and invite everyone that you meet on the road to. That will definitely help you enhance. Another quick example, if you do any of our tours or any other high school tours, you're going to meet a tons of high school counselors. Can something be organized for them after the tour? If you invite 20 high school counselors and 7 come, that's still a lot of influencers that you can engage, maybe give them a certificate of participation, and that's a really easy way to engage them. So I think that brings us to the end of our presentation. We went a little bit over time, apologies for that, but if you have any questions, we're definitely open to it. Looks like we did an amazing job because there are no questions. Well, thank you, everyone. I know it's lunchtime in some parts of United States. So thank you so much for giving us your time. We really enjoyed sharing whatever information we had with you. Thank you so much. We'll share the recording with you and have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Simple Ed, simplify processes, amplify results. Simple